The city of Ravens Hollow never celebrated Halloween like the others. While neighboring towns filled with costumes, laughter, and houses decorated with plastic monsters, Ravens Hollow kept its lights dimmer, its streets quieter, and its doors locked earlier. It wasn't declared fear, it was habit, a custom inherited, passed down from generation to generation, without a clear explanation. Children grew up knowing that night required more caution than joy. 40 years earlier, something had happened there. Something no one liked to name. Old newspapers called it the Night of the Procession, but that name existed only in the forgotten archives of the municipal library, kept among yellowed pages and time-stained photographs. To the residents, it was simply that night. The night 6 people died. The night a masked man walked through the streets like a solid shadow. The night when evil did not run. It only advanced step by step until no one had anywhere left to flee. The man was never found, and the city learned to move on, pretending that what happened hadn't left scars too deep to heal. Evelyn Cross could not move on. She was sitting alone in the kitchen when the clock struck 6 in the evening. The dry sound of the mechanism echoed through the house like a muffled gunshot. Evelyn slowly raised her eyes, as if the simple act of facing time were a physical challenge. Halloween had arrived once again. The house was old, isolated on the edge of town, surrounded by trees too tall and too close. No neighbors in sight, no music, no children asking for candy. Evelyn had chosen that place precisely because of that. Silence, control, distance. The kitchen was impeccably clean, almost clinical. Knives aligned, cabinets organized, nothing out of place. Everything needed to be exactly where it belonged. Evelyn believed, deep down, that order kept chaos away. She was wrong. Evelyn was 62 years old. Her face was marked not by ordinary aging, but by decades of constant vigilance. Her eyes carried a restless alertness, always attentive to the slightest sound. They never fully relaxed, never allowed themselves to forget. 40 years earlier, she had been 22, and she had survived. The name of the man who killed that night had been repeated so many times in the first months that it eventually became a forbidden whisper. Caleb Rowe, a simple name, far too ordinary for something so monstrous. A man who had been arrested after a family massacre years earlier, considered mentally unstable, silent, incapable of showing remorse. A man who escaped during a hospital transfer in 1983 and vanished. Officially, Caleb Rowe was dead. Evelyn never believed that. She walked to the window and slightly pulled the curtain aside. The sky was heavy, dark gray, as if night had arrived too early. The wind made the trees move slowly, creaking like ancient bones. She watched the dirt road leading to her house. Empty. For now. Evelyn checked the clock again. There was still time. There was always time, until there wasn't. In the center of Ravens Hollow, Marianne Cross parked her car in front of the local school. She sighed deeply before turning off the engine. The building looked the same as when she was a child. Beige walls, tall windows, the constant smell of cheap cleaning products, the kind of place that held memories that never asked to be remembered. Marianne was 38 years old, a teacher, a single mother. A woman who had spent her entire life trying to prove to herself that she had not inherited her mother's fears. She got out of the car and adjusted her coat. The cold wind cut her skin, reminding her that winter was close. Halloween always marked that transition in Ravens Hollow. From fragile comfort to isolation. Inside the school, the hallways were nearly empty. A few children still waited for their parents. Simple decorations hung on the walls. Paper ghosts, hand-drawn pumpkins, nothing excessive. Never excessive. Marianne picked up her daughter Lena's backpack from the coordination office. The girl was sitting there, swinging her legs, distracted by a drawing on the floor. "Mom," Lena said, looking up. "Is Grandma really going to stay alone tonight?" Marianne froze for a moment. "Your grandmother likes being alone," she replied, forcing a smile. "She always has." It wasn't true, but it was easier than explaining. Lena frowned. "The teacher said Halloween is for having fun, but everyone here looks sad." Marianne didn't answer right away. She took her daughter's hand and led her outside. "Not all towns like this date," she finally said. "Some remember things they'd rather forget." Lena thought for a moment. "Are we going to see Grandma later?" Marianne swallowed hard. Tomorrow, she lied. At 7:20 p.m., the first body was found. The man's name was Thomas Hale, 49 years old, caretaker of the old community center, a building that had been closed for years and now served only as storage. Thomas made extra night rounds during Halloween through an informal agreement with the city, more out of habit than necessity. He never came home. A couple passing down the side street noticed the open door, then the metallic smell, then the silence, far too heavy. Thomas lay on the floor of the main corridor, his body arranged almost carefully, arms aligned, legs extended, head slightly tilted to the side as if he were sleeping. But a deep cut crossed his abdomen, precise enough to rule out any accident. The blood had been wiped away around him, leaving drag marks on the old floor. No signs of struggle, no written message, no explanation. The police arrived quickly. Sirens cut through the night, doors opened, people began watching from their windows. Halloween had begun. When the phone rang at the isolated house, Evelyn was already on her feet. She answered before the second ring. "It's happened," the voice on the other end said, trembling. "They found a body." Evelyn closed her eyes for a second, not in surprise, in confirmation. "Where?" she asked. "Community center." She slowly nodded, even knowing no one could see her. "How many?" "One." Evelyn took a deep breath. "It's not over," she said. "He never starts with more than one." The call ended in silence. Evelyn walked to the basement. She descended the steps calmly, turning on the cold light that revealed what she had prepared over decades. Well-maintained weapons, flashlights, city maps with old and new markings, reinforced doors, extra locks. She had been called paranoid, crazy, exaggerated, but she was ready. Meanwhile, somewhere in Raven's Hollow, a tall man walked the streets without haste. He wore dark clothes. His face was covered by a simple mask, devoid of expression. No rage, no pleasure, just emptiness. He watched illuminated houses, distracted people, costumed children crossing streets without realizing they were being observed. The past had not died. It had only waited, and that night was meant to finish what had been interrupted 40 years earlier. The clock tower at City Hall struck midnight when Raven's Hollow began to understand that the night would not end with only 2 names added to the records. The wind carried a denser cold, almost damp, as if the city itself were struggling to breathe. Sirens sounded again at 12:47 a.m. This time, the call came from a distant residential neighborhood. An old house, dark wood, a porch creaking under the weight of time. The Harris couple had been found in the bedroom, still dressed in their sleepwear. There were no signs of forced entry. The front door remained locked from the inside. The windows closed. The killer hadn't needed to force his way in. He had already been there. The bodies were arranged side by side, their hands almost touching. The same cut, the same precision, the same absolute silence. 4 dead, and no witnesses. At the station, the atmosphere transformed into something close to collapse. Phones rang incessantly. Officers moved back and forth, carrying incomplete information, fragile theories, poorly disguised fear. "This isn't a normal man," one of the officers said in a low voice. "No one enters and leaves houses like that." Daniel Mercer stared at the whiteboard where the addresses were marked. A pattern was beginning to emerge, forming an imperfect circle, slowly closing. He murmured, "Pushing us where?" another officer asked. Daniel didn't answer. He knew the answer. Away. Far from the only person who still remembered exactly how this ended. Evelyn Cross was sitting in the dark when she heard the car stop outside. She didn't turn on any lights. She simply stood up, grabbed the shotgun, and walked to the reinforced door. Daniel knocked twice. "I know you're in there," he said. Evelyn unlocked the door just enough to see him. "How many now?" she asked. 4. She closed her eyes for a moment. "He sped up," she said. "That means he's getting closer to the end. Or he's getting careless," Daniel countered. "He never gets careless," Evelyn replied. "He just gets more determined." Daniel stepped inside. He observed the house as if entering a military bunker. Locks, improvised cameras, narrow corridors designed for defense. "You lived like this for 40 years?" he asked. "I survived like this for 40 years," she corrected. Daniel took a deep breath. He's following the same route as the first night, he said. But there's a difference. Evelyn raised her eyes. What? He skipped a house. Silence settled between them. Which house? Evelyn asked, already knowing the answer. Daniel swallowed. Your daughter's. Marianne woke to the sound of wind hitting the window. The clock read 1:23 a.m. The television was still on, displaying silent static. Lena slept on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Marianne stood slowly and went to the kitchen for water. As she filled the glass, she felt something strange. A sensation of presence. Not a sound, not a movement. Just the uncomfortable certainty that she was not alone. She turned slowly. The back door was slightly open. Marianne's heart raced. She approached in silence. Carefully touched the doorknob. Outside, nothing but the dark backyard. She closed the door. Locked it. Rested her forehead against the wood for a second, trying to calm herself. That was when she heard a step. Behind her. Marianne spun around. The kitchen was empty, but the chair at the table had been moved. She stepped back, the air leaving her lungs. Slowly walked into the living room. Lena was still asleep. It's okay, she whispered to herself. Then the light went out. The house plunged into absolute darkness. Evelyn and Daniel arrived on Marianne's street minutes later. Patrol cars surrounded the block. Red and blue lights reflected off neighboring houses, awakening frightened faces behind curtains. He was here, Evelyn said as soon as she stepped out of the car. We didn't find anything, Daniel replied. No victims. Evelyn studied the house. Every detail, every shadow. He entered, she stated. He wanted her to know. Why? Because fear is part of the ritual, Evelyn answered. He wants the prey to know it's being hunted. Marianne sat on the couch, clutching Lena tightly. Her eyes were empty, her breathing shallow. When she saw her mother enter, something broke. He was here, she said, her voice trembling. I felt it. Evelyn knelt in front of her daughter. I know, she replied, and now you're going to listen to me. Marianne swallowed. What does he want? Evelyn hesitated, only for a second. He wants to finish what he started with me, she said. And you're in the way. At 2:59 a.m., the fifth body was found. A police officer. The agent was on isolated patrol near the old rural road. The patrol car was found empty, engine running. The body lay a few meters away, leaning against a tree. The mask had been placed on the hood of the car, not as a provocation, as a warning. Panic finally broke the city's artificial restraint. People tried to flee. Roads clogged. Accidents happened. Screams echoed in the dark. And amid the chaos, he walked. He didn't chase crowds. He didn't need to. His path was set. The isolated house. The woman who didn't die. The generations that came after. Evelyn gathered Marianne and Lena in her house before dawn. She locked every access point, distributed clear instructions, without emotion, without room for doubt. When he arrives, she said, don't run. Don't scream. Follow the plan. Marianne cried silently. Lena watched everything with disturbing attention. He's not going to leave, is he? The girl asked. Evelyn knelt in front of her granddaughter. No, she answered honestly. But neither are we. Outside, the wind stopped abruptly. Absolute stillness fell over the house, and in the distance, slow footsteps began to approach. The silence around the house was so complete that Evelyn could hear her own heartbeat deep in her chest. No wind, no insects, no distant cars. Raven's Hollow seemed to be holding its breath. She watched the external camera monitor. The grainy image showed only the empty road, until a shape appeared at the edge of the frame. Tall, dark, motionless for seconds that lasted too long to be natural. Then, a step, another. He was no longer hiding. He's here, Evelyn murmured. Marianne squeezed her mother's hand tightly. Lena stood behind them, perfectly silent, as if instinctively understanding that any sound could summon something that should not be summoned. Footsteps echoed on the porch floor. A slow, deliberate creak. Each board protested under the weight of that body moving without haste. The front door handle turned slightly, locked. Another attempt. No force, just testing. He's evaluating. Evelyn whispered. He always evaluates first. A dull impact hit the side of the house, not violent, calculated, a blow to test resistance, then another, stronger. The wood groaned. Marianne's legs trembled. Mom, not now, Evelyn interrupted. Listen. The impact stopped. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, the back door alarm went off. He's inside, Evelyn said, already moving. The house, built by Evelyn over decades of fear, became a labyrinth of shadows and narrow corridors. Reinforced doors slowed him down but did not stop him. He never rushed, never lost the path for long. A door gave way with a muffled crash. Marianne pulled Lena toward the inner hallway according to the plan. Lights went out. The house plunged into partial darkness, illuminated only by weak emergency lamps. The sound of footsteps returned, closer now. Evelyn positioned herself behind a wall, weapon in hand. Breathing controlled, body tense but steady. She waited. The silhouette appeared in the hallway, tall, implacable. The white mask reflected the minimal light, empty of any human trace. Evelyn fired. The shot echoed through the house, deafening. The impact hit the figure's chest, making it step back. Just one step. It didn't fall, didn't scream. It advanced. Evelyn retreated, firing again. The second shot hit the shoulder. The third, the side of the body. He dropped to his knees. Marianne screamed. Now, Evelyn ordered. Marianne ran with Lena to the stairs leading to the reinforced basement. The door slammed shut behind them with a metallic click. Evelyn approached the fallen figure slowly. 40 years, she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. 40 years waiting for this. The figure moved. An arm rose, slow, persistent. Evelyn stepped back. Too late. He lunged forward with sudden strength, slamming her against the wall. The weapon fell far away. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. The blade appeared in his hand. The same cold shine, the same silence. Evelyn grabbed his arm with both hands, fighting to keep the blade away from her body. The masked face was too close. She smelled rust and old fabric. You never finished, she forced out. And today, you won't either. She pulled the trigger on the detonator attached to her belt. The ground shook. The basement containment system activated. Steel doors slammed shut automatically throughout the lower wing of the house. Hydraulic locks sealed the space where they were. The ceiling began releasing a dense, dark gas. He hesitated. For the first time. Evelyn smiled, even as her body failed. I didn't build this house to live, she said. I built it to trap you. She dropped to her knees. The gas burned her lungs. Her vision darkened. The last thing she saw was the figure trying to reach the sealed door, movements now less precise, heavier. The house shook once more. Then, silence. Hours later, the sun rose timidly over Raven's Hollow. Police surrounded the site. Firefighters extinguished controlled fires. Paramedics escorted Marianne and Lena out of the basement. Where's my mother? Marianne asked desperately. No one answered. The interior of the house was found partially destroyed. The sealed compartment intact, inside only debris, signs of struggle, and no identifiable presence, no body, no mask, no definitive answers. Evelyn Cross was declared dead that morning, as was Caleb Rowe, once again. Months later, Raven's Hollow seemed to attempt a fragile return to normalcy. New families moved in. Children returned to the streets. Halloween was officially canceled for an indefinite period. Marianne and Lena left the town. They never looked back. On the last night before the move, Lena woke up frightened. Mom, she whispered. I heard footsteps. Marianne got up quickly. The hallway was empty, the house silent. It was just a dream, she said, trying to believe it. Lena looked at the bedroom door. He didn't finish, she said with a certainty that didn't belong to a child. Marianne turned off the light. Far away from there, a figure walked down an empty road. The mask was cracked, the body marked, but the steps remained steady. Evil doesn't need to win. It only needs to survive. And it always survives. The silence after the fire did not bring relief. It merely replaced chaos with something deeper, something older. Raven's Hollow spent weeks wrapped in an artificial quiet, like a body that continues breathing even after brain death. Authorities called it a recovery process. Psychologists came from outside. Journalists tried to get in. The town turned almost all of them away. There was nothing more to say. That's what they claimed. But there always was. What was left behind? Marianne and Lena settled in a small coastal town, far enough away that the name Ravens Hollow didn't immediately spark recognition. A simple house, ordinary neighbors, streets too busy to allow absolute silence. That was exactly what Marianne wanted. Noise meant life. She went back to teaching, tried to create a predictable routine for her daughter. Bought new curtains, changed the locks, installed motion sensors, all discreetly, without mentioning trauma or justifying excess. She told herself it was just caution. But every night before going to sleep, she checked the hallway. Every night. Lena no longer spoke about footsteps. She didn't speak about masks. She didn't speak about her grandmother. The girl's silence was worse. She drew constantly. Always houses, always trees that were too tall, always an empty road. And in nearly every drawing, a distant figure, too small to draw attention, but present. Marianne pretended not to notice, until the night she found a different drawing. It was the old house, the one in Ravens Hollow, the basement, the steel doors, and in the lower corner of the page, a word written in crooked letters. Open. Marianne felt her stomach twist. Where did you see this? She asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. Lena shrugged. I didn't see it. I dreamed it. Marianne threw the drawing away that same night, but she didn't sleep. Daniel Mercer requested his resignation 3 months later. Officially, he claimed psychological exhaustion. Unofficially, he could no longer sleep without the lights on, could no longer drive at night, could no longer look at an empty road without expecting to see someone walking slowly ahead. He took something with him when he left the police station, a brown envelope, no identification, no signature. Inside were copies of reports that had never been officially filed, photographs that did not exist in any database, radio recordings interrupted by inexplicable static, and a folder marked with a single letter, E. Evelyn. Daniel never had the courage to open that folder while he was still in Ravens Hollow. He opened it months later, in a cheap hotel room hundreds of miles away. Inside, he found something that made him understand the mistake everyone had made. Evelyn Cross had not merely prepared to confront Caleb Rowe. She had studied something larger, something that used men like Caleb. Detailed notes described patterns that went beyond a single person. Dates, different cities, similar incidents separated by decades, simple masks, slow walks, impossible returns. Evelyn did not call it a killer. She called it continuity. One sentence was underlined several times, written in firm, almost aggressive handwriting. He is not unique. He is recurring. Daniel closed the folder with trembling hands. That same night, the hotel phone rang. He answered. On the other end, only breathing. Slow. Rhythmic. Daniel hung up. The phone rang again. And again. Until it stopped. The next morning, someone had left something outside his hotel room door. A cracked mask. Ravens Hollow tried to move on. Tried to erase the past the way it always had. Evelyn's house was demolished. The land was sold. A condominium project began to take shape. Architects came. Engineers evaluated the soil. One of them found something strange beneath the old foundation. A sealed chamber that did not appear on any blueprint. Inside, there were no bodies. There were recordings, old tapes, protected in metal cases, each marked with dates that went far beyond the 40 years everyone knew about. The tapes were collected, never released, but a sound technician listened to one of them before they disappeared. He described the recording as a woman narrating something that hasn't happened yet. He requested leave the following week. Lena began sleepwalking. Marianne found her daughter standing in the hallway at 3 a.m, eyes open, expression empty. Lena, she called. The girl slowly turned her head. He's walking, she said. Who? The one that doesn't end. Marianne held her daughter, waking her with effort. The next day, Lena remembered nothing. But the house's motion sensors recorded activity in the backyard that same night. No clear image, only a silhouette moving slowly beyond the camera's reach. Daniel listened to the last tape in a place where he could not be interrupted. Evelyn's voice was weaker, more tired, but steady. If anyone is hearing this, it means I failed to end the cycle, or worse, that the cycle is continuing exactly the way it always has. She described something she called behavioral echo, a pattern that manifests in specific individuals, on specific dates, in places that share isolation, repression, and collective silence. It's not possession. It's not individual madness. It's something that finds shelter in those who learn to walk without haste, to observe without emotion, to kill without apparent reason. She mentioned that destroying the body was never enough. The mistake is believing the end is physical. The tape ended with a warning. If he starts walking again, look for the child. There is always a child. Daniel turned off the recorder and thought of Lena. Years passed. Halloween returned to small towns, but never completely. There was always someone who turned off the lights early. Always someone who locked the door twice. Always someone who felt that night carried something wrong. In the new town, children knocked on Marianne's door asking for candy. She handed it out smiling. But every time she heard slow footsteps on the sidewalk, the smile froze. That particular night, Lena didn't want to dress up. He likes it when they pretend, she said. Pretend what? Marianne asked. That they don't know. At midnight, someone knocked on the door. 3 knocks. Slow, rhythmic. Marianne didn't move. The doorbell rang. She felt the same cold she had felt years before. From the other side of the door, a child's voice spoke. Trick or treat? Marianne looked at Lena. The girl was pale. Don't open it, she whispered. The voice outside repeated, trick, or silence. Then footsteps moving away. Slow, controlled. Marianne waited until dawn to open the door. On the ground, there was only one thing. An old cassette tape. No label. She never played it. Never. But that night, Lena dreamed again. And in the dream, Raven's Hollow was not empty. It was full of people pretending everything was normal. And in the distance, someone was walking. Always walking. Years later, in another city, another name appeared in the news. A silent man. A simple mask. No explanation. No escape. No conclusion. And somewhere, a child was drawing an empty road with a figure in the background. Evil does not need to be understood. It only needs to be ignored. And when it is ignored long enough, it learns how to return. Slower. More precise. More patient. And worst of all, it always waits until someone believes it's over. Some stories don't end. They only change address. And when you hear footsteps too slow to be human, don't run. Maybe he's just passing by you. This time,